think of it, I start smiling. Imagine living in Cuba, going to medical school in Cuba and having this dream of one day practicing medicine. And then you somehow get the ability to leave Cuba and get to Canada and go to McGill to complete your medical school. And you somehow after that get a job in the ER, which seems like it would be the dream after that many years of studying and trying and not sleeping and not eating and all what it takes to get into the ER. And you're practicing. And when you're finally there, you realize this is not what I want to do. And there's something better, because the whole reason why I did this was to make people healthy, and I don't see myself doing that. So it sounds unreasonable to think that after all that investment, you would walk away and say, I quit. But guess what? We're joined by Lief Sosa today, who did exactly that. He literally, as a medical doctor in the Emerge, was doing this work, did all this work to come here from Cuba, get his licensing done, pass every exam, miss so many nights of sleep. Once he finally got there and started doing the work, he said, this is not medicine, I quit. Thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Kashif. Thank you for having me here. It's a great pleasure, to be part of this. So
yeah, we just need to tell your story, man, because it says there's two things. First of all, I don't think a lot of doctors disagree with you. They already experienced some of what you're experiencing. There's the whole half of the awareness, like, oh, wow, there's a problem. The other half is like having the guts to walk away and saying, all of what I built and all that great income that I now have and the title and the prestige and all the stuff that comes, no thanks, right? There's something better. So what was that better thing that you were striving for?
So let me start by saying that I discovered like natural or functional medicine in 2015.
Okay. And you started practicing a few years before that. It was like 2010,
like
right?
In 2016 or so, I started actually practicing functional medicine.
Okay.
But I discovered, so I was doing ER from 2010 all the way until 2017.
Okay, so 7 years.
So there was like a little bit of an overlap.
Crossover, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what happened was that I discovered, I wasn't healthy anymore. So my brain got foggy, I gained weight, and I have a history of a skin, autoimmune problem like psoriasis. And I was scared for my health because I started developing allergies, like weight gain, as I said, my skin got worse, etc. And that's how I went on Google.
Yeah.
And that's when I said, let me figure out what other modalities and what other sciences are saying about psoriasis. And that's how I learned about, what is an naturopath, what do physiotherapists do, an osteopath, the chiropractor. So what exactly do they do? Because as a traditionally trained physician, the message we get is that it's quackery, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So basically, that's how I discovered functional medicine.
Yeah.
And after doing all the training and everything, I tried to change my scope of practice from ER shifts onto functional medicine. And that's where it got interesting.
Yeah, that's when you start to see things yeah.
So first of all, the process that you need in order to change your scope. So you need to find a mentor that is in good standings with the college. And then you have to be under their care, like doing some, like almost like an internship where you basically, work and under them. And that's how you eventually get released by the college in order to practice on your own.
Right.
So the first doctor that I found right after, I was called because this gentleman was kind of almost on the edge of retirement. And what I did is that I started working in that clinic because I really had hope that I was going to have him as a mentor and that I was going to be able to do, that process there, and then eventually would be on my own.
Right.
So the response that I got from the college is that he was not fit. He was not admissible to be a mentor. So he was not in good standings with the college.
Oh, really? And did they give you reasons why?
Yes. So he had some issues with clinical records, etc.
Okay.
And basically, this person was about 70 years old, was actually exactly 70 years old. And when you reach that age, the college does an audit to see if you're still fit to practice medicine. So that process for this physician was so stressful that he got sick.
Oh, wow.
And about 3 months later, he died.
Wow. So the audit killed him.
Kind of. Like, you can say those words.
Yeah.
Like, definitely.
Oh, wow.
So it was very, shocking to see that, like, this is a person that has been doing natural medicine and helping people for so long. And he didn't really have any major safety problems. Like, he didn't really cause harm to the people.
So there's no adverse events, like people walking around dropping dead. It was more like they're healthy, but he didn't keep his records properly. Exactly.
So he had to take some courses, and he was like on some kind of list for the college. And also because most doctors that actually do like natural medicine end up in some kind of list that, it's definitely not in good standings with the college. At the same time, I continued looking for other mentors. And then what I could see is that most doctors that, as I said, do this, have some kind of history with the college, and they are either denied, but the one that I found that could possibly was in good standing with the college, it was not in alignment with my personal values.
Okay.
So I don't know, you see the picture that you really have some kind of systematic oppression towards anything that is not like traditional protocols and the drugs and procedures that come with Western medicine.
Right. So it's somebody that says that I've done what I've done, I'm ready, but I want to learn more. And it goes beyond whatever I can prescribe. There's things there's no avenue or channel or conduit to access that for you, because it kind of puts a threat on your license is essentially what it looks like, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think the quackery thing you talked about, it's kind of like this license to speak of things as quackery, but really what it is that unless it's been through this evidence-based clinical trial model, they're not allowed to use it. Right? There has to be some Health Canada FDA type clearances. But stretching it from this hasn't been reviewed in a certain format or context to its quackery. And it's kind of this license that's been printed to say things are quackery that aren't. Just because the modality of how they're used, they don't need that kind of trial, right? So I understand when it comes to a drug, when you're putting a chemical in your body, you want clinical data because of safety. Efficacy is anecdotal. If I take a herb and it works and I'm not sick anymore, it worked.
Exactly.
Right? It's safe. It's food. So we're using this thing that's designed for safety to then all of a sudden call efficacy quackery when that wasn't even what it was for. Right? So
you come into the topic of the evidence.
Right.
And what I can say very boldly, I'm very bold, is that we really don't have the freedom to actually express what we think. Like the physician's intuition is kind of canceled.
Right.
We have to follow those protocols, and we have to really wait and echo just the evidence that is fabricated by the ones that have financial interests in all of these processes, in all of these drugs and procedures, etc. So in functional medicine, we really focus on the evidence, not only just the scientific evidence. It cannot just be the science.
Right.
So you really have to take that into consideration, because that is part of some kind of reproducible, process that, like kind of links with causality. Like, that something is caused by something and it's not something else. We need to be academic.
Yeah.
But then there's two other factors that are really important. Number one is the patient's preferences and values. That actually needs to be personalized. And number two is the physician's expertise.
Right.
And I find that it's absolutely crazy to say that, if something worked for me, that, it doesn't work. You are just crazy. Like, it worked for you, but it's anecdotal. We don't know.
Yeah.
So we have this kind of rhetoric that we cannot know anything unless it comes from that fabricated evidence.
Right. Yeah. And an evidence model that's designed not to create personalization, right? It's designed to create one size fits all.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then there's always, in a one size fits all model, there's always, a little bit of people for who it works amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a bigger chunk in the middle where it's kind of okay, and then there's some stragglers at the end where it doesn't work at all, right? So you end up failing ultimately what the intention was, where really that great response only happens to like 20-30% of people, right?
And there's also 1% that you forgot that actually experience harm.
Right, yeah.
And for that we have insurance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the whole system is really wrapped up on that sense. And that's what made me wake up and say, well, we are not really being proactive about people's health.
Right.
And the bias is so overwhelmingly present because you just have to follow the money. If I am healthy, then they don't make money.
Yeah.
So, and then we look at the statistics. Like, we really have to have the courage to look at the reality with our eyes. And like I'm 47, so I'm almost 50.
Yeah.
And I have 20 years of clinical experience in my back and in 3 different languages and 3 different systems. And guess what? They all do the same.
Yeah. You can't use your experience unless it's within the guidelines.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I understand that for safety, but how do you innovate and discover if you're never allowed to bring in something new?
Exactly.
Right. If you're only allowed to bring in what's new by a supplier that made it, right? You're on the front lines. You're the ones with the patients that are seeing what works and what doesn't work, but you're not allowed to bring that data forward because you didn't build a lab somewhere and build it out of a chemical, right?
Exactly.
So when you went out and started practicing, you obviously, it sounds like you said, there was a couple years overlap. So you already had this in mind, and you were kind of working on it. Where was the backlash, or was there any? Did you find that there was like some friction that pushed you away, or was it more just your own choice?
So interesting. So basically, as I said, I really thought that the process was going to be smooth and everything was going to work absolutely fine. But the college basically came after me and they said, well, you are under investigation for practicing outside of your scope.
Okay.
So it is in their maximum convenience, optimal convenience, that each doctor has their scope of practice. And if there is a doctor that can fix many things, they find that threatening.
So what exactly what you're doing that they said was out of scope?
Functional medicine. So I was supposed to if you do ER,
yeah, you
basically have to go back 1 year you cannot even go and do family practice. Like when you are a primary care provider,
yeah,
in the emergency and you see like kids, you see geriatrics, you see everything.
Yeah.
So doing family medicine, going and sitting and, taking care of high blood pressure and diabetes and just doing medications is not very difficult.
Yeah.
Like you have that kind of expertise, but they make it a very complex process as if you were doing a totally different science. Like if you were going to do surgery or something.
Right.
So right after so basically they came after me for being after the scope, being practicing outside the scope. And then a few weeks later, then I had an actually official complaint.
Oh, wow.
From somebody else. So I saw some kind of young person who was on 2 antidepressant medications.
Right.
And I explained the risks of that. And she had anxiety. And I basically gave her some lifestyle modifications, including magnesium, vitamin B6, 5-HTP.
Right.
Try a gluten and dairy-free diet. So in order to really reverse or, get off those meds, because she was still also in fertile age.
Right.
So all of that advice, she found that very dangerous. And she felt that I was not supposed to have a medical license. And then there was a formal malpractice complaint that was placed against me. And then I had to go through a CMPA lawyer, the Canadian Medical Protective Association.
Wow.
So why do we need that association anyway? Right? So I basically went through 9 months of writing. So this lawyer had to give her all the information on what happened, etc. And she was writing back and forth with the college. 9 months later, they basically come out with a one-liner saying that there's no evidence that I exploded the patient or that I harmed the patient or anything like that.
Yeah.
But they will not let it go.
So everything that you named, the 5-HTP, the B6, all this stuff, these are all, I can walk into any drugstore and buy them with no prescription. They are all Health Canada approved already. We're talking about practice in Canada, right?
Yes.
So I could walk in a drugstore. Health Canada has already vetted and provided what's called an NPN, natural product number, to put on the label to show that it's been approved for safety and efficacy and that the claim on the label is accurate. But if an MD tells me to buy those things, they're wrong.
Yes.
But I can go buy it myself. And the company that makes it can tell me on the label that this is what it's for, and Health Canada will stamp and certify that it's possible, you're allowed to sell it for that purpose.
Exactly.
But you, who went to school for half your life, can't tell me to take it. And so 5-HTP, like we know, so anxiety, serotonin, right? That the gene is called 5-HTT-LPR. That's what the serotonin gene is called. And that's why the supplement, you're taking, again, you're supplementing with exactly what you need to regulate this dysregulated serotonin, which would lead to this anxiety issue.
Exactly.
Science already exists. There's nothing that is contraindicating other than the fact that you're saying you're not diagnosing and masking a condition. You're looking at the biochemistry failure and supporting what was actually wrong so that they don't need to have a condition.
Exactly.
And you got nailed for that.
Absolutely.
Wow.
And I can tell you more. So I basically realized the whole system. And then when I saw the pandemia, that was the cherry on the ice cream.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in May 2020, like May 31st, 2020, my license expired. And I said, yes, you got me one complaint or two.
Yeah.
And those are the last ones.
So you didn't bother renewing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I also fill out the form to say I quit and I am not coming back unless the whole system changes.
Wow. So did you get calls from Cuba saying you're crazy?
I still think that there's a lot of people that look at me like a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
The campaign that the mainstream media has, and I don't understand why doctors stopped practicing medicine just to practice COVID. Everything is COVID and COVID, right. and it's like one size that doesn't fit anyone. Like one size fits none.
Right.
Like what kind of medicine is that? Like I could not do that. I could not go to work every day knowing that I was going to be just doing COVID.
Right.
And I am in my practice when COVID started, I was working still in a walk-in clinic. Okay. And I received patients, oh doctor, like so scared and super distressed. I tested positive for COVID and the hospital sent me home to do nothing and to call them next week to see if I need to go to the ICU or if I need a ventilator. So those were the hospital instructions.
Right.
And on my end, I gave those patients vitamin D and zinc and azithromycin. And 3 days later, they were absolutely fine.
Yeah. And this was while you were licensed?
Yes.
And did you get any backlash for that?
No.
No?
No, because, like patients don't really, they were like getting the help.
Right.
So I didn't get any patients that were like turning back at me because patients were actually
They were getting better.
They were getting better.
Yeah.
But I had a lot of emotional charge towards the system and what was going on. So I said, if I stay in this system, I'm going to get sick. I can't do this.
Yeah.
So then I jumped to become an entrepreneur and just jumped into a big adventure where I had a lot of unknowns, lots of risks. But it seems that is like an area where I thrive. I don't know how.
A lot of people will say that doctors, and this is a generalization, doctors make the worst entrepreneurs, right? That you hear that it's a cliche. I don't know how true that is. I think what it is that doctors are so pigeonholed in what they do that they don't have the freedom to think like entrepreneurs. But to become a doctor, you have to have the risk reward system of an entrepreneur. You have to be able to lock yourself in a room for 8 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Focus hard, work, like grind away, become a master of something, right? And then you still continue to build your brand within the system and who you are. So it's all similar traits. It's just all that's missing is the kind of risk of not having something to lean on, a salary, right? That cushion. That's the thing that gets people from, and you see this in lots of professions. You know, I have a friend that's a banker that wants to leave and start his own practice, but he just can't leave his salary. It's too comfortable, right? What about the mortgage? What about et cetera, et cetera? So you were driven, however, by something more powerful than money. It was pain. It was health. And when you start to think about losing your life, money doesn't matter that much, you know? And so all of a sudden you made a decision that most can't make. So now that you did that, so your entrepreneurial engine turned on, you said, I'm leaving. I don't need this system to support me. I can support myself. Did you run and open a clinic, or what was the next step?
The next step was I enrolled in Quantum University.
Okay.
And I registered in the program as a quantum health coach. Because the thing is that, so I got the full functional medicine training. Then I did 1 year of genomics, like doing webinars kind of every Wednesday, like an hour to an hour and a half to 2 hours for about a year, going through all those pathways. So after I had done functional medicine, going deeper into the biochemistry was really the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Then when I was ready to work, what happened was that I could not go into functional medicine, so I ended up doing cannabis. So my story is that when I was in the emergency, yes, I had a good income. But when I went to do cannabis, I was helping children.
Okay.
And in order to thrive in any clinic, pretty much in this system, you need to do volume.
Yeah.
So you have to write 40 to 50 cannabis prescriptions and really almost not even talk to people so that you can make some kind of decent income. Mm-hmm. And I also did not do that.
Okay. You took your time with the patients.
I was doing 20 minutes for patients with autistic children.
Right.
And people that have sleep and mood problems, chronic pain. I could not see somebody just in 2 minutes and just give them the prescription. I was working with people and telling them, stop the meat, stop the carbs, stop the grains, like things that actually may help for real. So that actually, I was not thriving financially in that system anyway. So I said, why staying anyway? So that I didn't even have the salary reason to stay in that system.
Yeah.
Right. So I said, well, if with all this training, then all I have to do is to go and build an online business, and I'm going to be absolutely awesome.
Yeah.
But that is something, that is another chapter. From the point of view of entrepreneurship mindset, me as a doctor, as soon as I got into the internship in the University of Montreal, so what do we get? We get the bank green light for debt.
Right.
So what happens is that we get, not only that people call us doctors, that we get money from the bank, like credit, like infinite credit. Basically, I could even disclose that when I dropped my license and I called the bank, they said, well, if you keep your license, you would actually have like a line of credit of $350,000, no questions asked.
Oh, that was part of the pitch. Oh, you're kidding.
Yes.
Oh, wow. From the college or from who?
No, well, that is actually the agreement of the bank towards physicians.
Right.
In people who were working for COVID.
Okay.
And throughout COVID, the payments were like very, very, very generous.
Okay.
So that is also part of the reason why all this operation has been successful.
Right. Yeah, we've heard a lot of that in the U.S. where there's certain diagnoses and certain treatments that got, like the whole ventilator problem that happened with people that literally were killed because of ventilators.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was a financial incentive that drove it. But for the, you know, the doctors also didn't know what they were doing, right? It made sense, the ventilator, and like, hey, if I get paid extra, why not? You know, but now we know a little more. At that time, other people knew, but
I don't know. Like me as a, you know, in emergency you do critical care.
mm-hmm.
So if you're telling me that somebody with a viral pneumonia,
Mm-hmm.
your number one and gold standard treatment is going to be to ventilate them, and I would not agree with that treatment, and I don't want it for myself, and I will not deliver it, because everyone knows that if you once you want to avoid intubating people,
Yeah.
because once they become dependent, there is like intercostal muscle atrophy and
Right.
respiratory muscle atrophy, which prolongs the stay in the hospital. It prolongs rehabilitation,
Mm-hmm.
and is associated with higher mortality.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw that as the only available treatment, and let me share with you that within a month of the pandemic starting, I received a survey from the college, and they wanted to know what I thought about vaccine hesitancy.
Within a month of the pandemic starting, you're talking about, wow, ground zero.
Yes.
Okay.
So I knew that this pandemic was to vaccinate everyone. It's not like we are here. At the beginning, it was conspiracy. So can you tell me what part of that is conspiracy now?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then you heard these politicians talking about new normal, and then this deployment of resources for people, and then like even depriving people from movement and light. I will never accept that as medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very, very angry and upset seeing how all of these measures that are so harmful and make no sense were followed by for most people, and how they deployed all of this with guns and fines and censorship since day one of this pandemic. Because I heard videos from doctors, from nurses crying, saying this is not right. This is not what they are saying, and the disease that we are seeing is not a viral pneumonia. I have been doctors that say have been doing critical care for years now, and what we are seeing is something else.
So how do you argue with all the people that say, well, I had 3 people in my family die from this disease? You're crazy.
So then you have to ask them, so how did they die? In order to really say that a viral illness is killing someone, we need to have proof that that viral load is off the charts in the blood at the time of death, and that they were actually sick because of the virus.
Right.
And what we saw was mostly, it's actually in the statistics, that 90% of the people who passed away were elderly with comorbid conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So we never, the young people that I saw, they recovered fine. And yes, you could get thrown back in bed for 2 weeks. Influenza could do that.
Mm-hmm.
We don't, where did influenza go all this last year?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, I really could not believe all of this.
So you got this survey, you didn't agree with sort of the protocols. What happened when you tried to or did you try to do what you wanted, and did you get pushback, or was there, how did you get through from being forced to intubate somebody to how do you say no to that, or were you even able to?
No, I was working in a walk-in clinic.
Oh, you had already switched gears at that point.
I had gears, yes. I had changed gears.
Yeah.
I was doing part-time cannabis,
Right.
part-time a walk-in clinic.
Yeah.
So I was not in hospitals anymore.
Right.
When COVID hit, I was doing the calls, virtual calls from my home.
Right. Virtual consults with people that were sick.
Exactly.
Okay.
Like lots of colds, lots of people with anxiety, I got called from males for erectile dysfunction, like more than ever. I was like, really?
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, stress does that. So you have to really explain to people what is the reason of that. Renewing medications, like it's not a system that values health.
Right.
It values the protocols and, like really prescribing same medications over and over. That is the established system.
So in the ER, I mean, that's very different where you're dealing with more acute things where people literally needs a solution right there and then.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that what we do in acute care is amazing. The ability to wrap somebody's broken bone or fix that terminal condition or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So the training that you get in the acute care, this is the thing that I've always seen is that you have this toolkit for how do you mask a problem, but that's the same toolkit we use for disease, right?
Mm-hmm.
In your training, is there any delineation or separation between here's how we handle acute, go fix it, versus here's chronic, let's understand why it happened? Or is it just the same?
Let's understand why it happens is really the right question, but it's exactly what the system doesn't want you to go to.
Okay.
So the why, they would say that they will need, like I don't know how many amounts of years into the future in order to prove, to see. They want the randomized controlled trial for everything. It's like, like you cannot clone, like do 100 of me and then divide it in 50 Lief that actually have nothing and then 50 Liefs. Like, no, you cannot do like individualized practice because it all comes down to a statistical game that includes harm.
Right.
So biochemical individuality are concepts that they don't understand. They say that it's too difficult. Most doctors actually are cynical about getting into the details. And, when you get like I want to be academic and understand the whys, etc. Many doctors act also like impatients. Like I just give me what is easy, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And like we should be more academic.
Mm-hmm.
I find that in this system here compared to Cuba and Europe have very similar systems where you get a lot of text, a lot of content, like you really stuff your mind with a lot of knowledge. But then when you are in front of a person, you don't really have a strong system to figure them out, like in tick. Like, and that actually is what I got with the system here.
Mm-hmm.
The system here is designed for the revolving door. One problem at a time and one pill at a time.
You reminded me of something. I was talking to a clinician yesterday from Austin, Texas, right? And I was talking to him about exactly this and the difference between mostly the United States. We weren't even talking about Canada, but the United States versus Europe and other countries like South America, Cuba, etc., right? And this is what he said. He said that Americans, and he was generalizing, he said the average American that he sees will accept the quick and easy answer because they're mentally lazy.
Mm-hmm.
Why are they mentally lazy? Because of the food that they eat.
Mm-hmm.
If you talk to the European or the South American or the person that has the openness and the ability and the receptiveness to take that information, they're mentally active. They're mentally energized. So they actually have the capacity to have that conversation.
Yes.
Right? So if you even have the clinician on the average mass day-to-day, family private practice, right? The patient themselves doesn't want to know.
Exactly.
Right? They just want the Band-Aid. First of all, if they've learned that is what they're supposed to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
I can do whatever I want. And when I break myself, you fix me. That's your job. Second is the state that they're in, the numbness, the food that they eat, like you're talking about the gut, the dairy, the grains, all this stuff. They don't have the capacity to go that far. Right?
Yes.
So he said that I see this all the time. And even if I want to help them, they don't have the energy to take it in. But talk about Cuba, talk about Europe, look at what they eat, look at how they live, right? So you then all of a sudden have the ability to do this, right?
Yes.
So You see that in sort of the functional medicine circles and people that are sort of paying for proactive medicine, but they're also probably eating properly and exercising properly and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they're receptive to it. But yeah, it's interesting that you say that. So, now that you're running the practice, you're into it now. That's old. Everything we talked about is old news now, right? Your way, it's history.
Yes.
You're now a functional medicine practitioner who happened to go to university for 10 years to become an ER doctor first, to decide you didn't like it. So what are the things you're now doing? What are you doing with people? Who comes to you? What are their problems? How do you fix them?
So basically, what we do is that we help people we like to work with independent thinkers.
Mm-hmm.
Just because of what you said, we are living in a very unfortunate culture that actually profits from people passiveness,
Mm-hmm.
and they actually just invite you to do nothing, and then the downstream they just give you something to calm or to treat the symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do right now is that we actually learned precision medicine and functional medicine, and what we do is that we can craft a very personalized lifestyle plan for people according to their DNA makeup.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very powerful. The most relevant case that I have is probably myself, because I could learn, from the point of view of my genomics report, that I have problems with my vitamin D receptors that
Mm-hmm.
actually explains the autoimmune problem.
Right.
The number 2 thing that I discovered that made a big difference is my serotonin genes.
Mm-hmm.
So since I support my serotonin with 5-HTP, CBD, St. John's wort, so I even medicinal mushrooms, all of those actually support your serotonin. And when you support your mood, you're also supporting your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I got into deep sleep and the experience of calmness,
Mm-hmm.
because I was talking about that earlier today, that I discovered like how anxiety and even any nervousness and stress, etc., are part of immune system activation.
Mm-hmm.
And they could be, part of your mind work, or it could be separate. Meaning, so I basically experienced this myself. When I was working in ER, I was working in a hotel. I was living almost in a hotel for 10 days at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was taking a regular breakfast in that hotel. So after my shift, not particularly stressed out, like being, like one normal day, I finished my breakfast and then I felt like nervous.
Wow.
And I was like, why am I feeling nervous when I am not stressed out?
Mm-hmm.
When there's nothing, like I have a big lake in front of me, everything is perfect, making good money, no stress. So that's when I understood that it goes way beyond that. So if you get scared about that immune reaction, what do you call that? Anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't get scared about it, then you basically can look into it and understand, even measuring your pulse after eating can give you a good idea if you are, intolerant or allergic to a certain type of food or not. So understanding how immune system activation and how that disrupts hormones, etc., that was huge. In order to understand mental health as something that starts in the gut.
Mm-hmm. And you essentially you're saying you have to rethink how you think about the problem. It's not that here's this thing that I'm feeling, now I'm worried because I have it, right?
Yes.
It's more that I've pushed some dial too hard or too slow, and now this is the warning sign.
Exactly.
Now let's focus and fix it.
Yes.
Right? So it's kind of like the trigger as opposed to the problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I like to say to my clients, in terms of neurotransmitters, I love mental health. So we need nutrients to make the neurotransmitters, and for that we have enzymes.
Mm-hmm.
And those enzymes can have polymorphisms or SNPs,
Mm-hmm.
as we call them in genomics. And if you know that, you can actually give the cofactors that enzyme uses.
Right.
So once the neurotransmitter has been made, it actually needs to jump in the bloodstream onto a protein that transports it.
Mm-hmm.
And if that protein is not properly configured and there's not enough affinity between the neurotransmitter and that protein, then you can overflow. You can have problems of availability of that neurotransmitter if that transporter is problematic.
Mm-hmm.
Then once, like all neurotransmitters and hormones in cellular communication, they communicate something far away from the cell.
Mm-hmm.
And at the other end, on the target organ, we have receptors.
Right.
So once that receptor is activated, then an action happens. And if that receptor is also has polymorphisms, that is also something that can change that outcome.
Yeah. Good receptor, bad receptor.
Right?
Yeah.
And then the last step is elimination and recycling of the useful cofactors, because our body is amazing and has a very inner wisdom and intelligence that is always aiming for homeostasis or keeping us in balance. Mm-hmm. And basically, when you do a genomics report, you can actually see whatever is clinically relevant for that person on each of those steps. And you can have like so many options to change those things. And it's not just vitamins and minerals. It is also herbs, it's acupuncture, it is environmental measures that you can do, avoiding certain modalities of technology. Like the sky is the limit of how many things we can do to modify how our genes get expressed.
Mm-hmm. So it's like your body's doing all this phenomenal stuff to protect you. Mm-hmm. And it thinks it's doing everything right, but it's you in the wrong environment, nutrition, or lifestyle exposure that is causing that thing to either work too hard or too slow.
Exactly.
Right? Remove yourself from that improper exposure and you'll be at this homeostasis. You'll be at this, like women, like, why do we go into menopause? Well, you don't want estrogen toxicity as you age when you no longer need to be fertile, right? It's worth the pain and the struggle during the fertility stage when you want children. Why does your body, through nature, shut it off after some time? Because that many years of estrogen toxicity leads to disease, right? Uh-huh. Why? That's one of the things that happens, right? And why?
Absolutely. I have something to say about that.
Yeah. Okay, well, tell me. What do you have to say?
I think that menopause has become a disease in a world where we're living in an estrogen dominant world.
Yes. Yeah.
So I believe that ladies are given way too many hormones.
Yeah.
Starting with, like body creams, makeup, deodorant, shampoo, all of it has estrogen.
Yeah.
Then they actually are encouraged to go on the pill.
Yeah.
And most of the hormonal contraceptives that we see carry some kind of harm.
Yeah.
Because not all ladies can actually metabolize all that amount of estrogen, plus what comes from the environment. Mm-hmm. So what happens is that they develop this estrogen dominance, and then when they reach their 50s, all that drops all of a sudden.
Right.
And because they have had so much influx of estrogen from the outside, then their ability to produce their own estrogen in the adrenal glands, which is the only one, has not been needed for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, that just plumbs down.
Yeah.
And that's when menopause becomes a disease of hormonal deficiency because of the environment that we are in.
Yep. It goes back to what you said, that the body is designed to do something brilliant, right? Mm-hmm. There's a purpose to menopause. The reason why it's such a pain point for women is because this thing that you're doing at a 1 out of 10, you're now doing at a 6 out of 10 because of your environmental exposures, because of the extra hormones, because of the toxic estrogens that are fueled by birth control and BHRT, hormone replacement therapy, and chemicals in the water or whatever, all that stuff. So that's where you have to bring it back to understanding genomically, what are you designed to do? We're not all the same, right? And if you understand what you're designed to do, then all of a sudden you understand what are those things that would turn those dials where I could have had a great menopause, right?
Yes.
If I knew what I was actually designed for. Or I could have a horrible menopause if I didn't know I made all the wrong decisions. It's not taken for granted that it's meant to happen. And this is true for all chronic conditions.
Exactly.
Right? So that's amazing that you're doing that work. So you're virtual. So how do people reach you if they want to work with you?
So I have a website, sosalifecoach.com.
Okay.
And there you can actually click book with me, and you're going to have a discovery call form that is pretty much to really understand what are your needs. And we can go on a call in order to see if we are a good fit to work together. And if you are actually willing to do the work, because it's not that I am a magician, as we just said.
Yeah.
So we actually have access to knowledge and the source, but the health outcome will depend on the person. If you are willing to do that work, how well you actually are able to stay away from stress, like how are you able to understand the triggers that are in your environment that could get you out of balance, and how you can modulate that so that you basically stay in your game and avoid illnesses and avoid chronic diseases. So we like to work with, as I said, independent thinkers that want to know how their bodies work and stop trying multiple blind treatments. Mm-hmm. So you really go to the goal, you go to the target of whatever is really important for you. And I know that there's people who are taking like a lot of supplements, and I did that, taking like handful of supplements. Right. And sometimes we need to do that for a period of time. But personally, I believe that no one is designed to be on X milligrams of something all year round.
Correct, yeah.
Our bodies need cycle, we need that diversity, and our nutrients are actually in reservoirs. Mm-hmm. And once they are full, then they overflow, and that's what happens with side effects. And then because we understand that it's not a linear pathways, it's actually 3D networks, we provide. So, if I give you, for example, B12, I have to give you other methylation elements as well as magnesium in order to eliminate the surge of stimulation that B12 can cause, etc. So it's really not the mood, and even no diseases is a switch on or off. It's really a long journey that needs compassion, and sometimes we progress, sometimes we plateau, and then we regress, and we need some guidance and motivation throughout the journey. And I personally believe that our bodies are not designed to fall apart.
Right.
If we do the right thing, mostly, before it's too late, because at some point there's a point of no return, you can age well. Mm-hmm. We're not supposed to go into dementia and, start having pains and aches and then moving less. I think that all of those things are part of our mindset.
Yeah, it's the aging, how you age, and disease is a choice. That we know, chronic disease, right? Mm-hmm. I remember speaking to a clinician in New York last week who specializes in what he calls aging medicine, right? How do you age better? And I said, what's the next big problem? He said, it's dementia. I said, why? He said, because people are living longer. I said, but why would that mean that there's going to be more dementia? He said, because dementia isn't a prescription. It's not meant to happen. It's the choices that we make that lead us there.
Yes.
So the problem is that because people are living longer, that thing, those choices, the food, the stress or whatever, there's more exposure to that for longer.
Yes.
So they're going to reach that finish line, right?
Exactly.
There's some people for whom genetically that trigger would have got them there a lot faster.
Yes.
Where now the people that are resilient, that could handle that problem, but eventually would crash, we're also getting them too, right?
Exactly.
So he said that's the next big crisis in healthcare. Because we're getting people to live longer, we're going to see more dementia and Alzheimer's because they're just exposed to the thing that causes it for longer, which in itself speaks to, he didn't even realize what he was saying. That it's your nutrition choices that get you there. It's not a disease that's meant to happen.
Exactly.
Right? So this is awesome, all the work you do. I mean, in order to achieve true health, optimize, meaning that what is my maximum potential? Everybody has different potential. What is your own personal maximum? You have to work with somebody. because it's not just like you said, tweaking those dials on the supplements, tweaking those dials on nutrition. There's no, even when it's personalized, it's still not final.
No.
Right? You still need to tweak and adjust.
Yes.
You might decide that it's summertime, you need to get fit and your exercise changes. What does that do to your body? Right? You might decide it's time to have another kid. It's fertility time, or, you know, whatever that thing is. If your body's in flux, you got to be chasing that with the flux of how do you deal with your health, right? And that's where I think working with somebody like yourself is amazing, because you're able to coach people through, as opposed to wait, get sick, treat it, and then I'll call you next time.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that's the reason that also justifies that we offer a membership model.
Okay.
So we really like to give you, to see you over a period of time.
Right.
Because implementing these changes takes time, and the easiest thing is to fall off the wagon.
Yeah.
And that is fine. We all do it. I do it. But our duty to ourselves and to our health, for our children, for the future, is to get back on the rail and really do the right thing, so that we keep our vitality and our bodies are resilient. Yeah. We don't have to be perfect 100%, because we know how many environmental toxins we are exposed to, and we still thrive.
Yeah.
And there's people who actually, with all of those toxins, they still reach to their 80s and 90s, like smoking and drinking and doing all kinds of things. Can you imagine if they didn't?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and then if you do it with moderation, like, it's not all about a yes or no. It's about how much can you get away with according to your genes.
According to your personal genes. Yeah, exactly.
Like, I know that if there is a buffet here, I'm not going to eat everything.
Yeah.
And we used to do that. And we live in a culture, like, you know, the TV that actually is really seducing us all the time with really delicious, over palatable foods that are not necessarily like nutrition or nurturing, right?
Yeah. Well, this was awesome, man. This is a great discussion. I'm sure people are going to love it.
Thank you.
Dr. Sosa, am I still allowed to call you a doctor?
Yes.
Yeah. So, Lief Sosa, you got the website. We'll put it in the notes so you can see it. And I would urge you, take the time to work on something like this. Thank you again for coming on. This was awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity being here. And thank you so much for allowing me to share my story.
No, it's great. Thank you, man.
And I really appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.